Hello and welcome to Intro to Computer Games and Simulations here at Lorain County Community College. I'm Mike Substonley, the instructor this term, and this week I am very pleased to present a guest lecturer who is here to talk about life in the computer games industry. Let's all please welcome Thom Robertson.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, everybody. I'm Thom Robertson. I worked in the video game industry, getting a paycheck from the man, and working on big-name products and in big-name console games from 1992 to 2003. After that, I went full indie, and I've been that ever since. Working, I still make video games. I've made video games all my life, but I no longer actually work at big companies in California. I'm here in Ohio, doing my own thing. Normally, when Mike asks me to come talk to these classes, I give an extended talk about who I am and all the jobs that I've done and all the products that I've worked on, but I'm not going to do that. And normally, when Mike asks me to talk, I also talk about how to get a job in the video game industry. And I'm not going to do that either. And the reason is because things have changed. So much has changed over the last decade. Like 30 years worth of change in 10 years. And the good news is it's all good for you. Every one of you is a beneficiary of the time that we've gone through at the beginning of the 21st century. There's never been a better time to make video games. There's never been a better time to learn how to make video games, to share your work, to make money off your work. There are all kinds of new avenues and fresh new opportunities that I really wanted to talk to you about today. So let's start with resources. Everybody kind of understands that when it comes to making video games are fundamentally computer programs. So you've got to have a programmer of some kind. And guess what? As a programmer, you've got more opportunities than ever. All of your basic languages are free. There's lots of really cool tools like Unity, like GameMaker, and many other systems that are out there specifically so that even people who don't know a lot about programming, can get into programming video games. So there's lots of opportunity for the programmer, for the person who wants to actually make the software. But there's also the role of the artist in video games, and there's another situation where the opportunity is almost limitless. Many of your 3D and 2D art tools are free. Take ruthless advantage of the fact that you're students, because almost all of the things that aren't free are free or cheap for students. And feel free to take advantage of that while you're actually a student, because I'm not anymore. So $2,000 for Studio Max? Fortunately, you don't have to do that. You're a student. And there's lovely free stuff out there everywhere. I like Paint.net as my 2D editor. I like Del-Ed CE, D-E-L-E-D space C-E, Community Edition, as my free 3D modeling editor. So there's a load of resources for artists that were never out there before that are specifically about helping you make art for video games. And then finally, there's other roles in the video game industry like designer and like musician / audio engineer. And there's plenty of free tools and low-cost tools for musicians and audio engineers. The thing about a designer is that in the role of the designer, your job is communication. And communication is normally written. So guess what? Nothing much has changed since the typewriter. If you're going to be a game designer and you can't program and you can't do art, what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to communicate with the written word. That has never changed, and it's not going to change. You're going to need to be able to convince people with your writing about how great your game design idea is. And again, whether you're getting a student edition of Microsoft Word or just some notepad tool that's built into your computer or whatever, the bottom line is that writing, there's plenty of free tools for you too. So there's plenty of resources, but you know what? On top of that, there's plenty of resources out on the web. I love a website called opengameart.org, which is where lots of artists go and just dump their art and say, here, use it. Sweet. As a game developer, you could do a lot worse than getting some great art for free. And there's plenty of other websites out there that are free or low cost in terms of art. But also there's stuff like the Game Maker website actually has a large community associated with it, and that community in turn can hook you up with programmers who have already written cool features or gameplay metaphors that you can actually pay them a little bit of money and get yourself a shark in your game, for instance. So more than ever before, there's opportunities to fill in the blanks with what you don't do or what your team doesn't do, and do it at a low cost or no cost opportunity. So, but I also wanted to talk because another one of the things that has changed so much in video games and is networking, is the opportunity to connect with your peers. There's so many game jams and so many conventions and so many websites out there that will let you actually connect to people who are just like you, wanting to make video games. And this stuff didn't exist before. I hardly recommend game jams. Some of the big ones are Ludum Dare. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. And there's a big one every year called Global Game Jam, which is held globally, but there's a game jam in your area or whatever. A few years ago, I went to the Pittsburgh one. And there are many other game jams besides. And I think these game jams are great not only because it forces you to make a game in a short amount of time, just so that you can, hey, I made a game. But it also puts you together with your peers so that you can actually sit down and talk and say, well, what did I do? Oh, well, you did this. Well, I did that. Oh, and everybody learns. This is very important, very valuable. And me, this grumpy old man, I didn't have those resources when I was your age. Grump, grump. So networking is really critical because if you're a programmer, you might need an artist. You might need a musician. If you're an artist, you might need a programmer, and so on. Looking around you in this room is definitely one way of connecting with your peers and finding people who could work with you to make your dream game. But this is the 21st century. This is the internet. You're now very likely to find somebody who is on your wavelength but lives in Moldova or Timbuktu. And yet you can still work with them just fine because of this awesome thing called the internet. Take advantage of that. You have more networking opportunities than ever before. And then, of course, there's actual conventions, actual gatherings that have never existed before. Things like I was just at Indiecade, which happened a few weeks ago in California. And it's not the only indie-specific convention. But if you can make it to one of these conventions that are specifically focused on the indie experience, I heartily recommend it because it's all your peers. It's all you. So, and when I say it's all you, I mean it's all people like you who love games and love thinking about games and love thinking about new ideas for games and maybe even coming up with your own games. And ultimately, what has obscured a fundamental truth is the commercialization of games from the beginning. We all saw games in the arcade. We've all played big games on the Xbox, whatever. But the truth is that whether you pay money for it or not, video games are art. And there's been lots of, social whatever, people saying, is it art, is it not art? Jury's in, it's art. Video games are art. Video games are art just like music, just like dance, just like sculpture, just like painting, just like writing, right? Same thing. And the corollary to this is very important for you, because if you're doing art, then you are an artist with a capital A, which means that you are like, in fundamental ways, the artist who paints, the artist who dances, the artist who writes. And so you should be learning from them because they are your peers as well. Musicians have a great deal to teach you about how to deal with fame and fans. Painters have a great deal to teach you about solitary work. Actually, writers, they're all about sitting in a room by themselves for 8 hours and doing something meaningful. You could do a lot by just paying attention to how writers think and how writers do their art. Art is very important, and the fact that video games are art means that you actually are part of a much larger community than you think you are. So, one of the reasons that I'm so positive about this and how I say there's never been a better time, and the opportunities are bigger than ever before, and the tool sets are better than ever before, is because it's not hard to see actual examples of this in action. Has anybody ever played a game called Thomas Was Alone, which is a game that's available on Steam right now and has sold reasonably well? Well, if you get behind the scenes, you find out that it was made by one guy. It was on the Unity engine, which is free for use or whatever, small fee. And he had never made a game before. And when he worked on it for a little while, he realized the only thing he could do in the Unity engine was make boxes. So his whole game is just boxes. And it's a big hit on Steam, right? So this is very much a if he can do it, you can do it kind of situation. Thomas Was Alone is a perfect example of how you don't need incredibly expensive art, and you don't need the vast and complex experience. What you need is focus and drive and a vision. So, and that's not the only one. A more absurd out there experience or example would be an iOS game called Flappy Bird. Now, that too was one guy just learning his tools and making something dumb. And it only happened that he made lots of money because of a statistical fluke of social networking. Everybody heard of him from PewDiePie, the social networking god. And it exploded in things. But if you ever played that game, or even a game similar to it, you go, boy, this is lame, I could make it too. And the lesson is not, let's all make crappy Flappy Bird clones. The lesson is that no matter how bad you think you are still capable of creating. And in fact, you're still capable of creating something potentially awesome. And it's as an artist, and again, as capital A, artist, but across the spectrum of art, every artist says, I could do that, but oh, what's the point? It's not going to be good enough, and it's not going to be right, and nobody's going to like it. This is something that dancers say, and writers say, and painters say, and musicians say, and they're all wrong, but especially wrong for you now here in this place, in this world, because these examples show that you shouldn't set yourself up for failure by suggesting that there's a bar and you are too lame to fit over that bar. Because you're not, and because the bar is really low. And this is certainly one of the really critical things I wanted to express to you guys. Now, having said that, no matter what art you're doing, the key to success, as any artist will tell you, is still hard work. Many times when I've talked to people about my experience in the video game industry, somebody will raise their hand and say, isn't the video game industry famous for making you work long hours and giving you crappy jobs and pushing you and maybe stealing your paycheck, and it's video games jobs suck? And I and pretty much all the other veterans in the video game industry will say, guilty, yes, absolutely. I've worked in plenty of jobs where they kept me there 12 hours a day, and they shorted my paycheck, and they had stupid rules, and I worked my tail off for somebody else, and it was a really horrible job. But here's the fundamental truth of the matter. If you're doing your art for yourself, you will work harder still. Anybody who has done that, who has said, well, I can work for the man for 12 hours a day, or I'll go work for myself, has wound up working 14 hours a day. And it's just how it is. And this means, of course, that as an artist, if you can't work your tail off for the thing you love to do with burning passion, then you probably ought not be doing that. Because the cool thing about being on your own and being an indie and working for yourself is that if you have that burning passion, you won't miss those 14 hours. If you have the burning passion, you'll just work that hard naturally because it's so cool and fun. And this is the state you should be seeking, whatever you're doing in life. And certainly, when I am, excited about an idea, and when I'm working hard and I'm thinking about this great game, I can't wait to make this game, then I will work late into the night, and I will fall asleep exhausted, and I will wake up early and get right back to work. Simply because it's what my passion is. It's what I love to do. And again, whether you're a dancer or a writer or a painter or a poet, this is common experience across all art, right? So this is what I was trying to say. What I wanted to finish up and say is that the opportunities have never been better, and the tools and the networking and the connections with other people have never been better. You have more opportunity to make the cool video games you want to make than ever before. But nothing in history is ever going to change the fact that you still have to do the work. You still have to work hard to achieve what you want to do. Now, I was just reading an article about a woman who paints for a living. She's a painter. She does art with a brush. And she had this great list of all the things she learned as being a commercial painter for 20 years. And it boils down to some very simple things, which I'm happy to share with you. Like, be nice to everybody all the time. Because no matter what artistic situation you are in, the world is too small. And if you're a jerk to somebody, it'll come back and bite you. Never burn your bridges. Be nice to everybody, even if you don't feel like it. Another of the simple things that she says is work hard. Because the truth is that you're in a pool of people making the same kind of things. But if you work hard, you're automatically in the top 10% of that pool. Because no matter what you're doing, whether you're doing art or you're painting or video games or dance, 9/10 of the people who are with you, they're lazy. For lack of a better word, all of us humans are lazy. So not being lazy automatically puts you in the top 10%. Awesome, right? And finally, she says, don't be afraid to ask for money for what you do. In the painter's point of view, that actually means getting a rich person to buy your paintings, or getting a rich corporation to pay you to paint the lobby of their building, or whatever. And you shouldn't lowball yourself. You shouldn't say, well, okay, I'll do that for $5 and a sandwich. Especially not if, as she puts it, if your client is rich. Go ahead and give your paint, your work for free to a charitable organization or to a homeless shelter. But when it comes to working for a big company, don't undersell yourself in terms of dollars. And in terms of video games, this also means that you should not only be not afraid of making a game just because you think it shouldn't be good enough or it won't be good enough, but you shouldn't be ashamed of saying, $10 please, or whatever the going rate is, or whatever rate you think is fine. The worst that can happen is you won't get any sales because people will say, I'm not going to pay $10 for that, in which case you can easily lower your price. I've certainly done that before. I've certainly put games on the market and then reduced the price on them before. So what she's saying as an artist with a capital A is work hard, be nice, and don't be afraid to monetize your work. And I think these are good enough to share. So I wonder how much time we have left, Mike.
Plenty of time. Another 10 minutes or so.
Plenty of time. Oh, I burned through my
12.
My list. So I didn't really necessarily want to talk and spend much time talking about video game industry jobs because I have been teaching here at Lorain County Community College for 5 years, and I have shepherded many students just like you through the entire program. And I'm disappointed at the number of people who have wanted to actually leave the state to go get a job in the video game industry. And that's probably one of the most important things you can do to go get a job working at, say, Electronic Arts or Ubisoft or whatever. Electronic Arts is in California. Ubisoft is in Canada. If you want a job at those companies, you have to go to those places. It's just a fact of life. Which is one of the reasons why I came here to talk about being an indie. Because you can be an indie any place on the planet with an internet connection. And that's awesome. I love it. But the jobs descriptions are not only similar in the video game industry, they're actually more rigid. You will get a job as a programmer in the video game industry. You'll get a job as an artist in the video game industry. There's jobs as designers, but they're very, very rare, pure design jobs. There are jobs as audio engineers / musicians. Basically, everything audio. Those are also a little tough to get, relatively speaking. And there's producer jobs, as they're called, which is the managerial jobs. And those are not going to be programmer jobs. They're not going to be artist jobs, but they're not really going to be creative jobs either. The job of a producer in a big company is not to make a great game, but to make sure the game gets done on time. So these are the kind of things that I would teach you, and that later, if we have a discussion, if you really want to know, I can give you a lot more detail about what video game jobs are in the video game industry. And in some ways they've changed, but in many ways they haven't, and that's disappointing because I have up and down stories about working for the man in the video game industry. But the truth is that I come to you with an exciting message, and that exciting message has nothing to do with working for the man. It has everything to do with chasing your dreams now. And as I've said, the resources are out there, and the networking is out there like there's never been before. And honestly, the marketplaces are out there too. But the marketplace has become as big as the internet itself, which means that you'll go on the internet and find 1,000 people talking about, how do I sell my game? Where do I sell my game? And there's no one answer. Certainly if you're selling an Apple iOS game, your short answer is the Apple Store. That's the only place you can sell your Apple video game. But that's okay, because it's only $100 a year. You borrow that from a family member and get on, and there you go. You upload your game after you've made it, and voila, it's for sale. And the Apple has a process whereby they check your game before they actually make it available for sale. And I can tell you from experience, that check is kind of lame and a joke. In fact, the game that I made, they couldn't be bothered to test it. They wrote me back and said, make a video of you playing the game so that we can look at the video and then we'll pass it. So I did, and I got passed. So did I mention it's a great opportunity and a great time to be alive as an indie game developer? So are we done? Is there any more to say?
Can you take questions?
Sure, I'll be happy to take questions in the time left.
I'll start off with a question.
Mike.
Please repeat that.
Okay. I think Mike was asking, is there an opportunity for content developers like artists to make money selling their art to other game developers? And the answer is absolutely yes. One of the big examples of this is a website called TurboSquid. And TurboSquid's job is to let artists who make 3D art, like a 3D rocket car or a 3D train or whatever, sell the individual train or rocket or whatever to individual people who need a 3D train for their video game. It's called TurboSquid. It's certainly not the only website out there that connects buyers and sellers of art, but it's one of the biggest. And depending on what you make and depending on how you sell it, you can theoretically make money. Now that's a commercial opportunity, so if all you want to do is make penguins, well, you've limited yourself to the number of people who want to actually make games with penguins in them. I happen to have known a guy a long time ago who made angel wings, because other people were making 3D models of characters all day long. He was making just packs of wings. Here's an angel's wings, here's a demon's wings, here's this wing, here's that wing. And he was making some reasonably good money because everybody wanted to upgrade their bosses with wings. So there's ways to do it, but the bottom line is that, yes, if you're an artist and you wanted to sell your art to peer game developers, there are avenues to do that on the internet. Any other questions? Yes, you get in order to... Yeah. He wanted to know, you have to pay $100 to put your game on this thing? And the answer is yes. The way Apple works is you become part of their developer program, and it's a $100 annual membership fee. And that membership fee gives you access to all their resources, all their development tools, all the things you need from Apple to make games on the Apple devices. And it gives you the at least implicit right to make as many games as you want that year and put it on the Apple Store. So it's not $100 per game. It's $100 to join Apple. Well,
resources out there.
Mike was asking if you're an artist and you wanted to make specific things for specific games, but you wanted to still work and get paid for it. And this comes back to what I was saying earlier about networking. You know, the best thing you can do, whether you're a programmer or an artist or a musician, is get out there and connect with your peers, starting again with this classroom. You know, you should all know each other's names and what you want to do, because that's a great opportunity. You know, there's so many video game companies out there from the dawn of time that started out with two people who met in college in a garage. That's normally the way video game companies have come into being. That's it. That's how it happened. It starts with two people who knew each other in college. So connect, and if you have specific ideas and you want to contribute, then yeah, find some existing team or some brand new team who has a little money and is willing to throw some your way in order for you to make the assets that they need. Or if you're savvy enough, you know, socially, get with that team and say, we've got to make a game about trains. And by the way, I'm really good at making trains. Right? So, and again, this gets back to the art issue. If you've ever studied how musicians make music, you find that there are 1,000 different ways to make music. There's different musicians. You know, some musicians will get into a studio and they'll say, hey, I can do this. Well, I can do that. Well, let's make a song out of it. Other musicians will carefully write down the music and then bring it to the rest of the band. Some other musicians will do weird things like, you know, they'll fire up their synthesizer and make strange tones and sit around going, I wonder what kind of music we can make out of that. There are so many different ways in which musicians work. And that is a clue to the fact that as artists with a capital A, we don't have one standard way that video games get made, right? You have to have people who come together and express themselves creatively. That's how it works. Any other questions? Yes? Well, there are lots, and I got to say there are so many that I don't know the complete list. But off the top of my head, I can certainly tell you that Mike Substoney teaching them in Game Maker is a great start, because Game Maker is actually awesome. There are games that are selling on Steam right now that are Game Maker games. Everybody agrees that Unity is a very hot engine. I agree. It's a very popular engine. Lots of people are using it. Lots of Unity games are on Steam. Lots of Unity games are being sold commercially. In my more advanced classes, I teach, and I have been teaching, C#, Microsoft C# with XNA, which is kind of an engine, and it's very useful, but it's actually fallen out of favor. For people who love that, though, there's something ongoing called monogame, which kind of extends the life of making a game in that particular way with that particular language. And there are other tools that are just coming up that are out there on the internet. You got to go find them. And there's only one problem with all these different ways of making video games in terms of tools, and that is that the time you spend learning one tool is time you're not spending learning another tool. And it's frustrating because all the tool makers say, yeah, our tool's the best. So it's really hard to figure out which one's the best and go ahead and say, okay, well, I'm going to spend the next 6 months getting good on your tool, only to find out that maybe your tool isn't the best after all. But you know what? You're young. And learning more than one set of tools, learning more than one way of making a video game is not a bad thing. So did I repeat her question? Because I'm not sure if I... So she was asking what other tools for game developers exist, and if I had a comprehensive list. And again, the answer is I don't. There are some that are more popular than others, but it's not hard to go on the internet and just type in game development tool and see what you get. Yes. He was asking if I have a preference for a coding language, and I can tell you that I've been programming C since 1987, and I've been programming C++ since 1982. However, I am so old and jaded that I'm starting to be totally over C++, and I'm starting to see all the reasons why C++, even though it's still considered the super awesome top layer language for greatest games ever, is not all that. And so there's a really old computer science joke that goes, for every language there is a problem, and for every problem there is a language, but do not use COBOL if you can avoid it. That's just, and again, it's ancient and it's old, and it's not even video games, it's just programming languages. And the fact is that practically any language will cut it. Practically any language you work in is good. It's what works for you. It's what you're comfortable with. And I am actually really good at rapid prototyping. I'm really good at slapping games together fast. And the secret of my sauce is simply being very comfortable with my tools and my language. So it's good to learn your tools and your language so much that you're really rapid fire awesome at it. But again, I wish I could then tell you that there's one language that you must be good at. But I'm not going to do that because that would be lying to you. There's lots of different languages out there. I could tell you some things like C#, Java, and ActionScript 3 are all the same language. They just have different syntactical variations, but they're all the same language. I could tell you that languages look similar and more similar as years go by. So if you've learned one language, you've got a real head start in learning all the others. But I can also tell you that development environments like GameMaker, which de-emphasize programming and emphasize states and development tools, are also becoming more powerful and more useful than ever before. So if you can use those tools, but you can't program, don't feel bad. Go ahead and use those tools. Use whatever tool you can do to get the job done. That's the number one thing. The way to set yourself up for failure is to say, well, I have to learn C++ because that's what the real programmers do. And then you spend 2 years fighting with C++ and never actually making your game, and you hate yourself and it's awful. Right? Don't do that. Do what you're comfortable with because you're an artist. You wouldn't expect a painter who's skillful with a brush to go off and make a Mona Lisa with an airbrush, right? If they've never touched an airbrush before. It's the same thing. Learn your tools, learn the tools that you feel is best for you, and learn it well so that you can use it to make the art you want to make.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much for coming to the class. I'm sure we all really appreciated you being here and answering the questions. Next week, we will be hearing from Lee Colson at the Blackstone Launchpad, who will be talking to you about opportunities and resources that are available here at the college for starting yourself up as your own business. The college is very happy to help you do that, and you'll love the presentation we have next time. In the meantime, thank you very much, Thom Robertson, and this is Mike Substelny signing off for Intro to Computer Games and Simulations here at Lorain County Community College.